Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Business and People podcast. We talk about business and then we talk about the people behind the business and we find out what makes them tick and how they got to where they are, lessons learned along the way. Now, speaking of lessons, our guest on the show today is the best-selling author of The Leader Habit. His work has been featured in Forbes magazine, Fast Company. He's the CEO and founder of Pinsight, the AI learning platform that really helps leadership and leadership development. Now, the client list for Pinsight reads like the who's who of the Fortune 500, with motor groups like Nissan and Honda, with American Airlines, T-Mobile, Citigroup, Little, Coca-Cola. In fact, Martin's work has been featured and focused all around the globe in terms of leadership. And he's joining us right here on the show to talk about his best-selling book, not only The Leader Habit, but the others he's written as well. And of course, Pinsight and how all that came together. Martin Lanik, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Wow, it's so impressive to see this. Now, I'm reading back through. You started off in Denver, Colorado State. You've gone on now to have a master's degree in organizational leadership and, of course, founding Pinsight, the leading AI leadership platform in the world. And with clients, as I just read off, that is just, ticking the boxes of the top Fortune 500. How did this all come together for you?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I have to think back. I started on this journey about 12 years ago now. And I went to graduate school, obviously, to become a psychologist. And that's what happened. I started undergrad and I fell in love with psychology, but then decided that clinical was not really the way to go. So I started exploring where is there a different option and came across industrial psychology. And it's in the US, I think a couple of years ago, is one of the fastest growing jobs in the US to be an industrial psychologist. And then, from graduate studies, I ended up working as a consultant. I got a job here in the US. Then they shipped me overseas. I was based in London for a while and worked with some of the world's biggest companies, helping them design executive assessment and development programs. And then the recession came. So this is now about 2008. And I realized that back then we were charging $10,000 up to $40,000 US for a single executive assessment. So I realized that, okay, companies are not going to be spending this kind of money on assessment anymore. HR development budgets are usually the first ones to get cut.
Yeah, sure.
So I thought, this is an entrepreneurial opportunity here. And back then, we were doing everything by hand. So probably some of your listeners, if they have gone through an executive assessment, they know that you kind of go to the office of the psychologist or the consultant, you sit down, and everything is done face-to-face. Super manual, crazy process, right? So I thought, well, there are so many inefficiencies here. We can actually build software. Well, first of all, move the whole thing online, so you don't even have to travel anywhere, and then streamline the processes and start using behavioral science, machine learning, AI, so that we are cutting down all the human components, but then preserving the components that are really most predictive. So it was really a combination. A lot of, and the funny thing is, some of the listeners might appreciate it that, I was fairly green, when I started this business 12 years ago. And many people were telling me that, it's in the middle of the recession. You should never start a business in the middle of the recession. This is the worst decision you've ever made. But then when you think about it, like when the economy is low and everything is down, the only way that your business can go is up from there, right? You cannot get any worse than we experienced in 2007, 2008. So. Anyway, so that was the beginning, and that's really a combination of education and then getting the work experience and then really finding the right opportunity, and that's how I got where I'm today.
So when you going back to that 2008 position, you're working with a big company in London who are doing executive recruitment or executive assessments, and as you said, they're spending $10,000 to $40,000. We can see the value of choosing the right people for the roles as companies are growing. We can also see the destructive value of choosing the wrong person. So we know categorically how important it is to have that leadership assessment in place. So now you're saying to yourself, wow, people are going to cut back on their spending. Obviously, my role here is Rocky. I know what I'll do. I'll go out on my own. how did you go from the guy who's working with a big company to being a startup founder of a tech company that's now using AI and influencing I mean, take me back to the actual days and weeks of, did you just go, let's code some stuff together and see what happens? Or did you get a team around you? How did that all work?
Yeah, good question. So first, I got a job as a adjunct faculty at a university here.
Okay.
So that's how I could pay my housing and my basic. Because you're right? This kind of stuff is not easy.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the first step. Was like let's kind of stabilize my life situation, and I did that. So I was teaching classes in statistics and psychology and whatnot. And then I started experimenting. So I have created a first version of our assessment platform that was basically like an inbox email type of shell. And then I would have people actually send standardized email messages to whoever fake address was on the other end. Right? And this was this was even before the MVP. So this was the absolute basic test of the concept. Is this even possible? Can we do it? And then from there, step by step, start growing the business.
Wow.
So we got the first client that was actually doing this. Then we got a second client. And then once we started bringing some money in, then invested in hiring a IT team offshore.
Wow.
I was actually born in Slovakia, back then Czechoslovakia. So I spoke the language, knew the culture. I was about third of what I would pay developers here in the States. So we moved IT overseas and then start building a team over there and then slowly start building the platform from there.
Wow.
And then it went through several iterations. Everything was funded from internal cash flows. And then probably 5 years ago or so, when it felt like, okay, we got the product pretty stable. We have a good understanding of the market. Like this could really be something. That's when we raised money to then invest in sales, marketing, and then start growing the business more aggressively.
Wow. So when you're teaching, you're back in the States, you're teaching, as you said, just to stabilize, just to get everything going. You're building not even an MVP, but a proof of concept, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The business. People are emailing, as you said, to random email address to see if we're going to have something here. You get your first client. Did you know, or did you expect, or did you completely not believe that you can be in the position that you're in right now?
Well, I think everybody dreams about it, right?
Okay.
It is so the heartache. I keep telling people, starting a business, it's really hard. It is harder than anything I have ever experienced in my life. And I think a lot of the entrepreneurs that are listening would agree. Yeah. This is not easy. If this was easy, anybody would do it.
Yeah.
You look at the stats, right? About 80% of new businesses fail in their first year. It's really hard. So I think what kept me going is this belief that really, we could change the world and this could really be something.
That's awesome.
Our internal mission as an organization. So we don't do these assessments just for the sake of it. What we're really passionate about is fairness. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that we are helping organizations and hiring managers to make the right decision and to fight these unconscious biases that all of us have.
Yeah, definitely.
When you look at some of the research, men are so much more frequently identified as having leadership potential than equally, sometimes more capable women, just because those are the stereotypes that we have. So it was this mission and then this belief that we could really change the world, we could make a difference here. That kept me going, and I think the whole organization going from now on.
How did you feel with the fundraising, with the money raising round? Was that a nerve-wracking experience for you?
Not really. So what ended up happening is, so by that point, I mean, I'm already 5-7 years into the business. Everything has been grown. I mean, very much on a shoestring, right? Organically from cash flows. But we were expanding internationally. So by that point, we already had partners or resellers around the world that were our strategic partners. And they translated our solutions and they were offering them in their market. And for the most part, those are the individuals that actually became the investors.
Wow.
Because exactly, we already had a business relationship. They knew our market. We are operating in a very niche market, that is highly specialized, and a lot of people, this is not real estate, or this is not right. So if you're not in this market, it's very difficult to even
believe that it exists.
Any decision, or that exists, exactly. So that was the benefit, that I put a lot of work in planning and preparing the business plan, and all of our projections, making sure that it was all solid. And then when we went to market, it was fairly easy. It only took a few months, and there were actually more money on the table than we wanted to raise. So we ended up doing a second round right after that.
Wow, fantastic. Congratulations. I really
You.
want to dig into the leader habit and the way that you've broken it down into 5-minute steps that people can weave throughout their day. I really want to dig into that, and of course into Pinsight. But can I just stay on the business side of things just for 1 second? As you've gone through the academics and the working environment of working in the big corporate and all of the things that we've talked to up until now, what did you feel like you had to learn that you were surprised by? What were you like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that this was something that was going to come across my desk?
I think the biggest aha moment was when I started putting financial projections in like a 3 to 5 year business plan.
Wow.
So as a scientist, I was trained for 10 years that I was in school, right? That everything has to be on every decision you make has to be based on data. Mm-hmm. So classic scientific model, right? It's like you look for previous research, everything is data-based, there's evidence. And then all of a sudden you get to financial projections for the business, like 3 to 5 years now. And to me, when I hired a financial advisor, a consultant to help me with that, but to me, it was like making stuff up from thin air. All of a sudden, how much revenue are we going to make next year? So, so we will give salespeople the goal of $500,000 a year. So if we hire 3 of them, that's $1.5 million. It doesn't work like that. Right. Yeah, it sounds great, but it doesn't work like that. So for me, it was, trying to find the happy medium for what's my comfort zone with, how much evidence I need to make a decision versus, just really making stuff up.
Yeah, actually, do you know what, Martin, I was reading not so very long ago, I'd be fascinated on your thoughts on this, that after a certain point of information, and I think the measure was the 80-20 rule, but after you have 80% of the information, the remaining 20% is not going to influence you in either way. At some point, you need to actually act on the data that you have in front of you. How do you feel with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. I think my problem was that, when you are building when you're predicting future of a company that has a history of 2 years, there is no way, all the investors, like, how do you know that you need to come up with the hockey stick,
right?
Like, how do you do it?
Yeah.
And the best, you can do is just, sit down and say, well, these are the assumptions I'm making. And then you just end up with a long list of assumptions. And then voila, at the end of your analysis, there's the hockey stick that you need to show investors.
Perfect. You just keep adding that 10% as you're moving along the graph and just hope it takes off. So Martin, as you're looking, your experience and then getting into leadership, and I'm reading here directly from the side, but it says that Forbes magazine described your work as an interesting analysis of the troubling problem of the millions of dollars that had already been spent on executive training and development that seemed to have such little effect. I liked that. But it was more succinctly put by 800 CEO Reed, which said Lanik, yourself, Martin Lanik's method works where other training programs failed. How did you come up with the work behind your best-selling book, The Leader Habit? How did you start to formulate the relationship between the habits and leadership and how that can be developed and worked with individuals and with companies?
Yeah, great question. I think it really came out of frustration with what was happening out there and what I've been seeing happening in the market. So when you any kind of leadership development program or any kind of discussion on, I need to change this, or I wish I knew how to better delegate, the first answer that people give you is go read this book or go take a class, right? That's our immediate. And there's this underlying assumption that if you get knowledge in a particular area, all of a sudden it changes your skill.
Right.
But that's not true. I used to actually, when I first started college, I was going to be a concert pianist. That's when my parents had an intervention. Anyway, that's a whole different story. But,
just a different podcast.
that's a whole different podcast. Yeah. The way that music education is structured is that you do have the music theory. You learn how to read notes. You learn about the models and all of that. But then you also have your lessons on the piano or the violin or drums or whatever you're playing. And that's when you're actually practicing the skill and you're honing the skill and you're doing this over and over. That's the part that seems to be missing from majority of the leadership development programs when you think about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like you read a book and then what happens? Well, you learn something, but does it really change your behavior? No. Right. You go to a class or you listen to podcasts or, whatever it is that you're doing, you think, oh, this is fascinating, interesting stuff. And then you wake up tomorrow, no change.
Wow.
So I start then thinking, well, are there some behaviors that we do regularly? And, can we think of leadership as really these ingrained habits? Because we all already act a certain way, right? There's a way how you give feedback to your employees. There's a way how you are interacting with your board or how you're putting a strategy together, how you're putting a business plan together. So you already have habits, and some of those are more effective, others are less effective, right? Because you have certain behaviors, leadership behaviors that you do automatically, you do them without thinking. That's the definition of a habit. So then I started thinking, and that's where our research came into play, where we try to identify what are really these behaviors of effective leaders. So what does it really look like when an effective leader delegates? What are the steps that they go through? And then the next question, well, now that we have identified these micro behaviors, how can we help people to internalize these micro behaviors so they don't need to read books or, they actually can start practicing?
Wow.
And that's how the idea for the leader habit came about.
So it's not so much about, okay, so you've been doing things wrong all these years and here's a sledgehammer to try and move you back across to a different course. It's taking, again, the music practice analogy into effect. It's learning something and trying it a little bit. It's trying that a little bit and again and again and again. It's doing that same, scale from C to C again and again and again. So it is small micro movements towards better leadership. Is that kind of...
That's exactly it. Wow. Yes. Yeah. But it's the practice, and that's really the key point, right? So in the book, to me, the biggest value in the book is the leadership exercises that anybody can do. Yeah. We did research. We spent 5 years going around the world. We studied about 800 managers, executives. And then based on this research, we're able to identify what are the key leadership skills. There's 22 of them. They break down to 79 different micro behaviors. And then we wrote daily exercises for each one of these 79 micro behaviors.
Wow.
So that based on, what you need to work on, whether it's delegation, communication, public speaking, being more charismatic, influencing others, creating buy-in, delegating, planning and organizing, strategic thinking, all of this, there are daily exercises to help you actually build habits, effective habits in these areas.
So is the book formulated in such a way that you can flick to page 37 because you're struggling with communication, for example, and you can just start to put those habits into practice because that's the area that you need to work on, and then you can move to a different bit in the book and focus there? It's not a start to finish, like it's okay, I need help in this particular area.
It's a manual.
Wow.
It's written as a manual. So you have kind of that prose in a few chapters of the logic, why habits, why leadership habits, how do we come to the point where we are able to identify this catalog? And then you get a catalog of these daily exercises.
Fantastic.
That you can do. So it can help you develop your own skills, but then also as a manager, how often do employees come to us and say, or you come to employees and say, you really need to work on your communication or your influence. So rather than just saying, hey, go read this book or go, take this class or e-learning, here's an exercise that they can start practicing and you can start seeing the behavior change.
No wonder it turned into a bestseller. That's fantastic. I love it.
Thank you.
And you've got a few other books there as well.
No, this is it. This was my first book. First and only book.
Fantastic. Do you still seeing sales of that going through every day? I'm sure.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
yeah.
hopefully
It
we can get
came.
a few from the podcast. So guys, go and buy Martin's book. It's called The Lean Habit. Go and keep him in the lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah. It's thank you. It was the number one new business book in China when the Chinese translation came out beginning of last year,
Wow.
and then slowly I think it came out in Russia and Vietnam, and
Fantastic.
now all the different translations are coming.
So are your parents happy now that the intervention and the piano thing, and have they read the book, and have you given them a signed copy?
Yes. Yeah, they're saying, but you should have listened to us. A good thing you listened to it.
Nice. It's nice to have that certification that you've done that part.
Yeah.
But now, as you transition into Pinsight, which came first, the book or the software?
The software,
Okay,
the
cool.
software came first. Yes, well, the assessment software, right? So that's what I've been talking about. That's the ability to assess leadership skills and help companies make promotion, hiring, succession planning decisions. But then, kind of the other part of the book and how that came about was our clients were coming back in and saying, well, we got all this data on our employees, and now we have all these classes and books that we can ship them off to actually help them change. And that's when I said, well, can we
do that?
Can we develop something that's going to maybe more helpful, more effective? Can we now take the assessment data and then turn it into a development program? Fantastic. So that focuses on the behavior change, right? And that's so the research that went into that product was the book, and then we have a software application, an app that now took all these concepts from the book and scaled that across an organization. And so now you can send leaders through an assessment, and then this app is using artificial intelligence. It reads your assessment results, and based on that, puts a development plan for you. And then on a daily basis, it sends exercises to you. And then it knows, well, as you're working with it, right, it knows how much you have improved based on artificial intelligence, how you are interacting. So it kind of becomes like a Fitbit for leadership development.
Wow, how amazing. And that's a great tagline as well, like a Fitbit for leadership development. You can see your steps, you can see where you need to brush up, you can work it through. So I'm looking at the dashboard at the moment of Pinsight, and I love the kind of benchmarks that you're putting into place, where you're looking at succession and you're looking at skill gaps, personality traits, learning agility, leadership competencies. So taking people through the program with Pinsight. Can I ask you, Martin, when do you prefer to get involved with a company? Do you prefer to get involved? We have a good executive team and we're kind of growing and we want to grow to the next level, or do you prefer the startup who is, we want to make sure we do things right from the beginning? Or like, when should somebody come to Pinsight and say, let's grow our team and grow our business as a result?
Yeah, great question. So usually we get plugged into big strategic initiatives. So example, a new CEO comes on board and says, we need to turn this ship. And in order to turn this ship, we first got to understand, well, what's my leadership talent? Yep. What am I working with here, right? So we run assessments based on that, determine, what's the bench strength, where are the gaps, and then align it to the strategy of the business to help first, based on the assessment, make decisions. Well, who are the right people who should stay on the bus, who should be the ones that should be developed, and then who are the people that, unfortunately, with the new direction, this is not the right place for them. Yeah. So that's usually the first decision, and then from there, the development program helps to align the leadership behaviors that we now need with the strategy of the business. Wow. So let's say that you are looking to, now a lot of CEOs are worried about retention, right? Yeah. So we know specifically, like, what are the leadership behaviors that help you retain talent? And then, of course, there are slight differences from organizational culture to organizational culture, but we know in general what these things are. So you could start training your leaders on these behaviors, and through the app actually monitoring as they are improving and changing the behavior, so they are retaining more and more talent underneath. And then you can start using this also in the hiring process. So now all those people who you decided that they're not the right fit for the new direction, so now you need to replace them, and you would use the assessment to start bringing new talent in from the outside. Wow. That is now much more likely. So you're not just shooting in the dark, like an interview. Oh, I think they're going to be okay retaining their people. Now you're using science to actually do that.
Wow. Tell me a story. So is there a client, without giving away anybody's secrets or names or brands or anything like that, tell me a story about a company that you've worked with where you took the executive team or took the leadership team and you were able to subtly move that direction to a result. Like, tell me a story about the...
Sure. In the US right now, a lot of organizations are going through a digital transformation. I think all around the world, but healthcare in particular is experiencing a lot of digital transformation here in the US. So we're moving to online kind of consultations with physicians. So virtual medicine is on the rise. There are new demands of the customer base there. So we're working with a large healthcare system that is, a couple $2 billion in revenue. And as the new CEO came on board, she said, well, we are not prepared for this. And we need to really invest in new leadership behaviors in order to be competitive and to adapt to this digital transformation. So we started working with them a couple years ago. First, we helped them identify what are really the core leadership skills. So given the future, right? What are the 5 or 6 competencies that every single leader in the organization needs to have? Then we designed an assessment, put 700 leaders across the entire organization, from the top executive all the way to frontline managers. This would be like nurse managers, charge nurses, so all the way down. Everybody goes through the assessment, gets feedback, and then starts on the application, so that everybody's moving in the same direction in terms of their leadership skills.
Wow, that's
yeah. So it's a massive, as you can imagine. This is a multi-year project. But it's wonderful to see some of the early acceptance and changes and how the culture of the organization is shifting. And, one of their biggest problems was accountability and innovation. So how they are starting to see more and more accountability come into play. And then that, of course, makes it easier for them to implement some of the strategies that they need to in time.
I find it fascinating that an organization of that size, with a new CEO who has the vision of what's coming and looks at where they're at and says, we need to move. And this started 2 years ago. So she was obviously had a clear enough vision of what's happening in the industry to gather the troops and say, if we stand still, we're going to be done. This is where we need to move the whole organization. And you've put 700 leaders through that program. Martin, at the beginning, was there pushback from a percentage of that 700? Was there a set in the ways kind of banners up and defensive in amongst that, or did the whole team say yes, let's go?
That's a very good question. So when you think about it, anytime you bring in an assessment, there's going to be resistance, because every manager likes to think that they know best.
Sure.
Right? I know my talent, or I know how to pick the right people, because I've done it for so many years, and that's what got me successful. And that's all great. And some managers are really better than others. The problem for any organization is that you need to standardize this. Right? So if every manager is using different criteria, that's when you have a problem. So with standardization comes resistance, because some people, you're taking something away from them. And that's generally what produces that resistance. But you need that level of standardization, because otherwise, you cannot make better decisions if everybody is using different criteria. Then you cannot move the entire organization.
No, definitely. Direction. The wheels are turning in different directions. There's no kind of unity there. I'm not sure if it was part of the Pinsight crew that were handling that change management, or if it was internally at the health organization. But how, if how did they get that buy-in from the resistant people? Was it just a matter of keep bashing at the wall until they go through and accept it, or was there a process that went through to help people accept that assessment and standardization?
Yeah, it's a long process. So we started with from day one. So I said, first project was to identify what are the success criteria, right? Like what are the 5-6 competencies? So we heard from everybody in the organization. So every leader got an opportunity to either participate in an interview or focus group or fill out a survey. Yeah. So you start from day one, right? Because if it's your ideas, if this is what we are not coming in with our 7 criteria. This is your criteria that you told us. Right? So yeah, so it's a whole change management project. So that would be the first one, right? So you build the solution for the client, and you set it in the context of the organization. That's number one. The number 2 is you start from the top. So it was the CEO and her executive team who were the first ones to go through an assessment and got feedback. And some of it was harsh, and others. They of course had some strengths, but they modeled the acceptance of it.
Wow.
And that's where.
Public, or were they kept private?
Pardon?
Were the results of that executive team, the C team, were they publicized, or were they?
No. Yeah, private, right? Because
because otherwise there would be dissension. I guess there would be, mockery, and that would make it even harder. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Wow, Martin, what do you think is not spoken about in terms of leadership enough?
I think so here's how I'm going to answer your question, right? So leadership and any sort of leadership development or discussions are ultimately about change, right? We are either trying to change ourselves, or as consultants we're trying to change others. So it's about change. A lot of the leadership stuff I see out there is about ideals, right? So you have to know your why behind success, and all these kind of great ideas of understanding your values and your mission and all of that. As a psychologist, I always think that there are 2 paths to change of any kind in humans. You can either start with the mind, or you can start with the behavior. But these are related. So if you change somebody's mind, their behavior is going to change as a result of that. So you start changing how you view yourself, your behavior follows. The other path is change somebody's behavior, and they change their mind in terms of how they view themselves.
Wow.
It's much easier to change your behavior than it is, or anybody's behavior, than to change somebody's mind. So I would encourage all of us to stop thinking about leadership as something, a big concept, but rather start thinking about it like, how can we break this down? So what are actually the small behaviors that distinguish effective leaders from less effective leaders? And if we can do more research in this area and really put more investment in how to help people internalize these behaviors, I think that's really a much easier path forward. And then all those grand ideas about leadership will follow. But I would say focus on the behavior.
So this is obviously the leadership habit, the essence of the book that you've written. Mm-hmm. I can completely hear what you're saying in terms of changing someone's minds or their ideals or their beliefs or whatever. You could spend a lifetime battering against that wall and not have any productivity. But if you can simply put a framework in place and say, okay, as an example, and this may be a crazy, stupid example, this is a great way to do delegation. This is a good step-by-step process for delegating a task. And that is an easy thing to put into practice rather than trying to change somebody's perspective about why they should delegate or, what the process of delegation is meaning and all that kind of stuff. It literally, if you can put it in terms of a doing behavioral process, then it becomes a much easier thing to integrate than the beliefs behind it. I see that completely.
But the beliefs follow. They are interconnected, right? So the mind and behavior. Yeah. So then you get better at delegating and you realize, I'm good at delegating. I must be a really good leader. And then, right, so you change your attitudes and your beliefs as a result of that. Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's just much easier path to change.
I was seeing that you mentioned there was 79 micro habits in the leader habit. 79. Okay. 79. So guys, go and get the leader habit, okay, from Martin Lanik. And whatever you do, just go through and start to use it, as we said, as a manual. Develop that skill. Can anybody put those leadership practices into place? Martin, have you worked with anybody that that is so far out of the what we would call the square that some of these processes just simply don't exist for them? Or is there something there for everyone?
Anybody can do it, but it's sort of like a treadmill. I can place a treadmill in your living room and it could just stand there and you'll never use it. So this is a tool. But at the end of the day, if people don't use it and don't practice, then there's not going to be any change as a result of that.
I understand. It's that joke, isn't it? How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to want to change,
Exactly.
So true. Yes. Absolutely. Martin Lanik is the incredible mind behind Pinsight and, of course, the author of The Leader Habit. Martin, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and bounce around with you. I think that the development of leadership skill from anywhere from, the school age right through into early adulthood, into leadership roles in the corporate space, I think is such an important role to play. And the work that you've put in with the Leader Habit and, of course, with Pinsight as well, is really giving a solid toolkit for people to effectively improve that area. And I think that's an amazing position that you've created. Again, thank you so much. I'll make sure that the links to Pinsight, people can go and do an assessment with Pinsight. They can start to see where their strengths are in the leadership. And then, of course, work with the app behind that to integrate some of the habits to help them become more effective in the leadership areas that they can brush up on. Martin, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to bounce back and forth with you. I so look forward to keeping in touch, and we'll make sure that we send as many people your way as we possibly can and help that leadership realm, that next level coming through with you as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Cheers. Wow, I'm in awe. Thank you, man. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. This is good. It's always fun.
I'm so fascinated by what you've built here. You'll see my application come through. Like, you'll see my. Well, I'm so impressed, man. Honestly, like.
Thank you.
What you've put together. Something I didn't dig into, and I did mean to actually, was your focus on fairness. And it actually we're still recording, so we might have this as a pre.
Okay.
So when you're talking about fairness in terms of the assessment, and we look at the equality of people now, and we look at it should be the best leader for the position. It should be the best person, not based on skill or gender, or sorry, not skill, but gender or background or anything like that. When did your focus on fairness start to come in? Because as you've built Pinsight, I'm guessing that you started with that assessment tool, and then you've built in the app behind it and the habits. When did you start to go, hang on, let's make sure that this is all about equality and fairness?
I think that's sort of that's why you do it,
right?
Like, why else would you need an assessment on people? So it's really, when you think about it, and I know I've made so many bad hiring decisions, as an entrepreneur and manager myself, that you realize that, I don't trust my gut anymore on this. And I want, I want data.
Yeah.
I want data. And our research shows, we just completed a big research study with Purdue University and George Mason University, where we where we studied how organizations identified the next generation of leaders. Now with the war for talent, tight labor markets, organizations are not so much hiring leadership talent from outside, they're searching inside. So managers are rating the employees in terms of who has leadership potential, who doesn't have leadership potential. And the level of bias was really astonishing.
Wow.
We found, for example, that managers are three times more likely to identify men as having leadership potential than women.
Wow.
Based on nothing else, just the gender. And they are 2 times more likely to identify white men as opposed to black men as having leadership potential. So then this, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if me as a manager, right, if I believe that you have leadership potential, I will unconsciously start giving you extra assignments, coaching, network you through the organization, start making introductions for you and so forth. And there might be equally, maybe even more capable person on the team who's a woman or who is a person of African descent. But just because they don't fit my stereotype of what a leader should look like.
Not getting the opportunity to
They're
grow.
not getting the opportunity. Yeah. So that's I think is these days the biggest challenge that women and minorities face as they try to climb the ladder in corporate America, is that they just don't get opportunities.
Wow.
I read recently, I forget which book it was, but there was this analysis of discrimination in today's world. We think of discrimination as something bad, right? Something that bad actions that are done to certain people. But that's not true today. Nobody, well, there might be few, but unfortunate individuals, but generally that's not the case. Today's discrimination is really about helping. It's about giving unfair opportunities in the form of help to people who fit our groups.
A stereotype.
Yeah.
So as you said, it's an extra assignment here. It's a nudge in the right direction there. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as
the rating. It's even the rating. We found that today in high potential programs in US companies, there are twice as many men than women. So, and organizations are very open and vocal about the fact that they invest significantly more resources in building high potential employees and developing them, fast tracking them into executive positions.
Wow.
And they're for every man or for every woman that they grow and they invest in, they're investing into men.
Wow. So as people are going through Pinside, is that the name, the gender, all that kind of stuff irrelevant or hidden behind the other results and strengths and areas that they're talking about? And then from the answers, from the data, then we can flow that back to the candidate, the person.
Yeah. So in our case, so there are tests. So you fill out tests that are, pure ability type of, personality test. But then we actually place you in a simulation. So we put you, if you're applying for a vice president position, we put you in a VP level role in a fictitious company. And then we have third-party independent raters who are trained specifically to watch certain behaviors. And those are the ones that are evaluating you. And you're being evaluated in a standardized situation by 3 independent raters.
Super cool.
And then that's combined then with the personality learning agility test.
Wow. What a fantastic service. That is so very, very cool. And as you said, it's focusing on the ability rather than the person, and putting the right person into the role.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's the blind auditions for leadership. I love it.
Yep.
It's so
absolutely.
Cool. It's great. Martin, thanks, man. You're amazing.
Thank you.